Yeah, I have a male body. Yeah, I have these longings to be a woman. Yeah, I might have attraction to women, but that's just part of the discovery process. There's no limit. Just let it be what it is. A lot of people say,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're deciding to be trans today." No, no, not at all. Oh my God, this is something that I felt all my life. And so it had nothing to do with trying to disrespect people, trying to disrespect any religion, but just more like finding the truth of me as a person. And of course, there's experimentation. Some things stick, some things don't. But it's at the same time, it's just part of the discovery process, which is part of being human.
What do you really know about people who were born transgender? Have you ever met someone who's transgender? Well, if you're like me, you're curious but hesitant to ask questions. Well, welcome to Demystifying the Transgender Journey. In our conversations with people who were born transgender, their families, friends, and the professionals who support them, we ask probing questions and discover insightful and educational answers. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. Now let's get right into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. I'm your host, Lynn Murphy, author, speaker, and leadership coach, and I'm the cisgender half of the team. And I'm joined by my co-host, the amazing Wendy Cole, who's the transgender half of the team. She's a gender diversity consultant and speaker. And together we bring you honest, thought-provoking conversations with people whose lives and experiences help us better understand gender, identity, and what it truly means to be human. And today's episode is one that you want to stay tuned into. This is an amazing episode. So think about this. What happens when you spend a lifetime trying to fit into a version of yourself that was never fully you? Today, we're joined by Siena, whose story is one of the most introspective and powerful journeys we've heard. This isn't just a conversation about being transgender. It's about identity, truth, and the long road from self-repression to self-integration. And Sienna shares what it was like to grow up without the words to describe what she was feeling and without representation, meaning examples of others who are like her, and with deep internal knowing that there was no safe place to land. So, what you'll hear today is thoughtful, honest, and at times deeply moving. There may be some things in this episode that will trigger some people. So, be sure and take care of yourself. If you hear something that bothers you, take some time out, whatever you need to do, because your well being matters in this. So, today's discussion with Sienna is about what happens when you stop asking, who am I supposed to be? And you start asking, who am I really? So let's get into
Mm.
today's episode. Sienna, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn and Wendy. I'm glad to be here. And I feel
Well,
grateful that you're letting me on the show. Appreciate it.
we appreciate you being here and sharing your story. And
Definitely welcome.
just to set it up a little bit for our audience, since nobody can see you, but you are in your 50s, is that right? And transitioned 7, 8 years ago. I'm trying to get the dates right from what you told us before. Am I
Over
close?
60 now.
Over 60. Okay. For those of you who can't see her, she doesn't look like she's over 60. She looks fabulous. So, Sienna, let's start out a little of your background, a little of your family history, and who you were as a child. Were you aware of some of this as a child, and how did you grow up?
Okay, I grew up in a relatively conservative family. Grew up at a time where, all the messaging was about men and women. There was very definitely clear and distinct roles and expressions for men and women. And when I was really, really young, I don't think I really thought about it, but as I started probably to get to the age of 4 or 5 years old, I definitely would notice just a sense of connection with women and girls that I felt, but I didn't see that around me, and I knew I wanted to be a girl when I was very young. I mean, I can't put an exact age to it, but I would say the 4 to 5 year old range. And of course, those longings were always expressed in private. There was no expression to other people. There was just like thoughts about it, fantasies about it. Again, I don't know how I did that calculus in my mind, but I must have known at some point that that didn't fit into what I was seeing around me. So I just didn't say anything. And I think I was also brought up in an environment where, at the time it wasn't unusual for the fathers to be the authoritarians in the house and the ones who spoke, and that was the house opinion. That was kind of what went in the house, and my mother didn't speak up very much. So I kind of maybe mirrored my mother's behavior in terms of just not speaking up.
Mm-hmm. It
Just not
wasn't safe.
speaking up. It's something that wasn't going to be popular, that wasn't going to fly. So it was just about feeling like I needed to placate the situation just to keep everything calm.
Well, and what was society like at that point in your life? What was around you? What kind of messages did you get, not just from your parents, but from society then?
Yeah, there definitely was roles for girls and boys. I wasn't raised in a church, but it was just, again, it was definitely clear how girls dressed and their behaviors and how men dressed and their behaviors. It seemed so, well, that's just the way things are, that kind of thing in my mind that
Mhm.
maybe kind of added up in my mind. And it's like, these are men and these are women, but I want to be a woman. But for some reason, that gave me a lot of energy thinking about that. But I noticed I felt a lot of, I mean, I guess call it dysphoria today, but just kind of a sense of like lack of connection in my own body, even then. But I really, because I was young, I really couldn't tell. I didn't know where how the body kind of formulated into that until I probably got a little bit older. But at the same time, there was that longing to be a woman, even though, I didn't really understand it. And so it's just everything around me gave the messaging. I mean, there are some things that when like cross-dressing on television, that was always a joke. Right. That was
Mhm.
always the running joke, right? And I remember seeing shows like MASH, or if it was some kind of comedy routine, and the Flip Wilsons of the day, with Geraldine, and I mean it was all meant to be
Mhm.
funny, and so and that was meant to be, people were meant to be picked on. So very young, probably not too much. I wasn't exposed to much, but as I got maybe toward middle school, and you started watching more television, and it was expanded to more television. Oh yeah, that was another thing. Watched a lot of cop shows, and it was always like the queer women that were being brought into jail and for doing whatever or cross-dressing, that they, so it was like they were criminals,
Mhm.
very clear. So the messaging was laughing stock, criminal, and then, of course, like even reading in my social studies textbooks when I maybe middle school, and you flip the pages and they talk about cross-dressers, right? And they show you these probably late 60s, early 70s New York City, and you know, men who were dressing up as like maybe 40 style feminine dress, but it was like made it look very seedy. It was always framed as like a disorder, or, some kind of deviance.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's what it was considered by the medical community then. That was the official diagnosis: psychological, no treatment, no cure. That's what I was told in 1970, 71.
and Sienna, did you know anyone who was transgender, or maybe at what point in your life did that concept kind of come to front of mind for you?
Good question. Probably it wasn't until high school, because again, everything that I saw was kind of pointed toward, you know, some kind of deviance.
Mm.
And okay, yeah, there was several things going on. One was the Anita Bryant
Oh,
during
yes.
high school, and I lived in Florida,
Mm.
big thing. And then also, that's when Renee Richards was outed.
Mm.
And I remember watching a 60 Minutes show on her, and it was like, and we actually watched it.
Oh, yes.
We actually watched it, which is like, okay, that's cool. And I just remember my eyes were riveted.
Mm.
I hung on to every single word of that special. And it was scary because I didn't realize till later that she was outed, and that just talked about how she just, didn't have to pretend anymore.
Oh, she
She was
made that
more,
clear.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was very inspiring to me. And I was like, I want to do that.
At that age.
Yes, I must have been like 16 or 17. And there was I want to say, there was a young, I mean, I would say trans woman now, who was a person of color at the time. And I was scared of her. I mean, I didn't want to be associated with her because I felt like that was getting too close to how I felt. I
Oh,
feel kind of, I was afraid. And
So you weren't afraid of her as the person, you were
I was
afraid
like
of.
probably more like, wow, because I remember I could see that she wore a bra to school one day. And of course, everybody joked about her. And yeah, it's a space that I wasn't ready to occupy.
Hmm.
And I will talk about privilege for a minute because I was gaining privilege. I was popular in high school, did well in school, did well in sports, and that's intoxicating in some ways because I felt kind of like there's a sense of layer of protection there,
Hmm.
which kind of got formed. And as we probably go through the podcast, it gets deeper.
What was it like going through puberty? She laughs.
Wow. Yeah, that was very difficult. Puberty was very difficult. It was, of course, as I had sexual dreams at night or, ejaculate at night, it'd be kind of like, what's going on here? But I noticed getting aroused the way I got aroused mainly was pretending that I was a woman.
Mm,
Although I was attracted to girls, and that's a twist here because I didn't know what to do with that because there was a sense of like attraction. But at the same time, there was this, I guess I call diametrically opposed desire to be a woman. And of course, there was no boxes for that.
hmm.
And I think I started dressing up my mother's clothes maybe when I was like 13. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
13 years old. And oh, that was a new world. It was like, because she was out of the house more. And of course, dad was working. So I would go up and like try some of her clothing on. And it was like, oh, so exciting. I was just felt so happy. And that really was, again, once I was in that and it felt so good, but I also felt ashamed.
Mm,
It seems like they kind of grew up together, that feeling of shame, the judgment of being perverted, at the same time, just starting to explore my sexuality and what I really enjoyed as a gender expression. And so it was really heavy. I did have a girlfriend. I did, have a girlfriend, and there were sexual experiences, but I noticed that there was some kind of like friction internally with that. And I just couldn't express it. I never expressed it to anybody, but it was kind of seen as a loss of interest
hmm.
in sex. My longing still existed. I mean, there's things I liked about puberty. I liked having strength. I was a relatively handsome, masculine presenting person, and so I did like the attention.
Hmm.
So that's a layer. It's another layer, another brick in the wall. But at the same time, still that longing to be a woman, but not knowing what to do with all those feelings.
So how did
Um,
you feel about your male body?
I mean, I
You said
really
you like
didn't.
the strength, but
Yeah, but I would just have jealousy toward the development of girls.
mm,
Definitely. I would see girls developing and about 14, 15, 16, and I was like, more of that longing of like, oh, I wish I looked like her kind of thing.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you're talking about the cross-dressing, your mother's clothes, the juxtaposition of the joy of that, and then the shame coloring that.
Yeah, not,
That's a hard thing to deal with, isn't it?
it was, I think that's when I discovered drinking.
Mm, early on.
Yeah, I want to say that I started drinking maybe I was 14.
Oh, okay.
So there was some degree of self-medication. Part of it was a never feeling. I mean, there was some stressors in my family, in terms of not feeling like enough or not doing enough or not measuring up. But that definitely was something that I couldn't express to anybody. And at the same time, with the dysphoria, didn't know what to do with it. And it's triggered enough where I just would just probably just numb.
Mm,
So I poured myself into school and did well at that, poured myself into athletics. And then when I had free time, yeah, smoke cigarettes and things, anything to kind of calm my nerves. I needed that kind of something to calm myself. And drinking was another kind of escape or attempted escape that I tried because it seemed like I need to conform, but it's like there's a lot of inward suppression
mm,
and especially pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself for excellence. That stress, as well as kind of pushing away my gender dysphoria and those feelings of desiring to be female and to socially conform, it was exhausting. And
That's a lot to
so,
carry.
yeah, there was a lot of things going on in my life, but at some point, my parents had divorced, and I think I was again kind of going into a world where I just didn't understand. The more of myself that I was pushing away, kind of the more lonely I felt. I felt depressed. And I can't say if you actually get to the point where you're ready to pull the trigger is an attempted suicide, but I did, and on a
Mm.
couple occasions. So I was really suicidal at some point in my life.
What stopped you from going through with that?
Fear, fear,
Fear of,
fear of just like I don't want to kill myself,
mm,
but I don't want to live either, So it was kind of torn in this world where I was existing, but I didn't know why. Or trying to continue to exist, but I don't know why. There was a lot of inward pressure. Of course, I lived for affirmation from people. I depended on that a lot. Getting good grades, excelling, being the nice person. All those things really mattered to me because I hated myself. I really didn't know how to take care of myself. And of course, then I'm building more bricks in a wall by kind of like just trying to conform and to gain people's favor. And especially going out into the world on my own, there was a sense of just being acknowledged as a person. It felt like a need that I really needed to exude some kind of personality. And I felt like to be a certain kind of person, smarter than everybody else, had to be the answer person, had to be the go-to person, had to make people feel good around myself. It's just put a lot of pressure on myself.
so then there were the things that you did to compensate and distract, like you're saying, the alcohol. Did you continue numbing out with the alcohol and other things? Did you do cross-dressing at the time?
Okay,
What
I
were
want to
some of
say
the
that
things?
ended probably in high school. Just as I went to college, I got kind of distracted with college life, which could be a lot of fun. I mean, I learned how to play piano. I was doing well at school. I was the head of one of the activities in my school department. I was playing in a band. I just did all kinds of just stuff. I partied, of course, and that was, I wasn't alone. I certainly wasn't alone in that. Found plenty of friends to do that with, which I really enjoyed at the time. So it just, I want to say, and I came a bit of like maybe an amateur philosopher.
Mm.
Um, yeah, just between the drinking and other illicit drugs that kind of make me feel connected and alive. And I needed that just to feel like that somehow I had a place in the world. And so I went through college and I didn't do any cross-dressing in college. And then I went to grad school. I was partying heavy in college, and then I went to grad school. And of course, my first year, I'm picking up the same habits,
Mm.
but things started to shift. I just found that I was kind of hanging out with the undergrads and not relating to my grad students as much. And I was still kind of looking to escape in that way through drugs and alcohol. And at some point, it was just like I had to do more and more and more just to kind of get the same effect.
Mm.
I just found that behavior became a dead end. I mean, your things were happening to me. I was getting in a little bit of trouble. I won't go into it, but I was just getting in trouble. And probably it was affecting my relationships with people. One day I just stopped.
Cold turkey, just stuff.
Everything. At that moment, I could see that it wasn't addressing my fears.
Hmm.
The drinking it wasn't fixing anything. And I wasn't in good shape and I was smoking and so my body, I could feel it in my body.
Hmm.
I just didn't like that. I could just tell that I wasn't getting the same gratification from it and it was doing me harm.
So you were very self-aware at that point, what was going on.
I like to think of myself that way.
A
There's
lot of
always
people,
more to learn, but maybe for that age, that was a good step.
did you hear a lot of people just keep going down that road until they hit rock bottom? And it sounds like you were able to stop before you hit that. And especially thinking about, I know you've got an amazing intellect and you talked about perfection and having to have good grades. And for heaven's sakes, you're in grad school and I know your degree is in something that's not basket weaving. So you had a lot of pressure on you, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I wanted to meet those what I thought expectations that people had of me. So it was really the image of myself that I build up and that other people were thinking about me and that somehow I felt I had to meet. And that was unchallenged in myself. So, so the next step after letting go of substance abuse was I noticed I started paying attention more to like yoga, meditation, Buddhism
Mm.
were kind of introduced to me in certain ways, but it wasn't in a way of like, oh, you have to do this thing. It's more like just a curiosity. Like I remember one time being hammered and and going in and this young woman was doing a yoga session in our dormitory and she says, "Come on in." And I says, "Oh, I don't know if you want me doing this." So she says, "Come on in, you know."
Mm.
And I did a yoga session and it just was so relaxing. And my mind just noted that. And I had met some people that were studying Buddhism, and they would talk about some of Buddha's teachings. And I started reading about Buddha's teachings and started doing some meditation. And it was like starting to see that the mind can naturally quiet itself without coercion. Just no need to kind of struggle with it. And so there was experiences of like quietness of the mind without doing anything. And then that shifted me like, oh, of course, then my mind kind of goes into high gear at that point and says, oh, this is something that's important, which it is. But at the same time, there was a certain amount of acquisition, like, oh, I want to be a monk. I am going to be the enlightener of the world and that kind of attitude. So it was that expectation again, looking for approval, looking to do that thing for people that is going to bring them calm and bliss, which is it's not wrong, but in terms of like the attitude towards somehow it's going to reflect on me that I'm a good person.
Oh,
You know what I
okay.
mean? That somehow I'm going to be worthy then.
That was your payoff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was, you know, I took a year leave of absence from school. I was going to quit completely, but a dear friend of mine who was a administrative assistant at the school says, there's a year leave of absence. Just fill it out, give a justification, and you can come back in 1 year. Okay, I'll do it. All right, I'm not going to be back, but I'll do it. I did it. I'm glad I did it. Um,
And what did you do during that year?
I moved and got a cheap place and a couple jobs. And so I had dishwashing job, real simple work. And I was doing
Mm.
meditation and writing, and just kind of dialoguing with people. And it was it was like, felt very free. Oh my. But I noticed as I got more into that experience, maybe a few months, 4 months, that anger started to crop up, fear started to crop up. All those things, of course, I've avoided in my life.
Mm.
And I didn't see it at the time. I saw it as a failure that, oh, I feel guilty. I feel ashamed. I feel angry. I feel afraid. And all these are things that I'm not supposed to feel if I'm enlightened.
And what was the guilt and shame about at that point? The secret
Well,
you were
I
still
think I was
hiding?
failing. I felt like I was because I couldn't control my mind.
Okay.
I couldn't control my feelings that I was failing somehow. So that was,
Oh.
I mean, all those feelings came up because of that. So the more I kind of like hinged my self-worth on being able to like control my mind,
Mm.
the less I could do it and the more intense it became. So it was a lot of self-deprecation.
Mm.
And I started isolating, but at some point I said, I need people. So I ended up learning all this stuff about all these feelings I have that I'd never really faced before. I was still doing the meditation, doing a lot of writing. Then I got a job, and that's where I met my wife, who's to be wife.
Okay.
So all these things, I said, oh, I'm never going to have another relationship again.
And
They're too painful.
and here you are,
Yeah.
37 years later, you still hold it.
Yeah. So it's been a road. It's been a joyous road in many ways, but it's been very difficult in many ways. So again, about the cross-dressing, all that went away. I mean, I could not deal with that whatsoever. And so, being enlightened and enlightening the world and, really good intent, that was going to be enough. But going back into this world of like feelings, which I ignored, that's my first real step in living. But it wasn't really until I went back to school, went back to grad school, and I want to say within the first year after that, I mean, there was some stressors. I was going to get married, and like I was afraid of that, and so I didn't know how to deal with that. But the feelings of gender dysphoria, I was starting to reconnect with them. I mean, my mind was so self-suppressed that I really could compartmentalize things, but I had a huge, huge mental health toll.
Hmm.
A huge mental health toll. Again, I went through drinking and then delusion of grandeur about, enlightening the world, which was another kind of escape, form of escape. And then finally landed on my feet and saying, I got to deal with my feelings. Nobody can do it for me. I have to learn how to love myself.
Yeah.
And so getting to that point, then the dysphoria started to come more in focus. So I was seeing a counselor and I was starting to cross dress a little bit. And and that felt good. And I was going to counseling and I said, oh, I need to talk to my counselor about this. So one day I wore kind of a cute little top but it was winter, so I could wear my jacket, walk into counseling, my winter jacket. And then when I got in the counseling session, you know, counselor says, hello. I says, hey, how you doing? And then I said, I have something to share with you. And she says, oh, what's that? Then I took my coat off and she laughed.
Ooh.
But she didn't, I mean, it was probably so way out of her typical client. I'm not sure she knew what to do with it, but we worked together. I really did appreciate her. She tried to put me on a good place, but I could tell that by the end of that, it's like I had all these feelings, but I couldn't reconcile my body, and I didn't really understand that I didn't have to try to reconcile the two. You know, that I could have a male body and that I could want to be a woman and have no sense of identity with my body. And I felt again that even like 30 some odd years ago, was still considered a deviation. It was considered
Mm.
so it was kind of like something that had to be treated or like controlled.
You couldn't be authentic. You couldn't live the way you wanted to live. Is that what it was like at that time?
No, no, I mean, um, I did start interacting with the trans community where I was living. I didn't go to meetings, but I did like read their newsletters, and I ended up calling the president of this particular group. And then she was describing that she was starting hormones and having breast growth and just expressing her gender and just really just, you know, really finding joy in herself. And in the same breath as I'm getting divorced and I can't legally see my children anymore.
Ooh. So that wasn't hopeful for you.
Oh no, I was like, oh, I might want to have children and I don't want that to happen to me. And it's like, this is my body. I might as well get over it. Kind of that attitude. That's the kind of attitude I had toward myself. Just get over it. I think I harbored beliefs that it was somehow disingenuous. It was some kind of putting on a masquerade, not really realizing that that whole integration is an expression of itself
Mm.
instead of like feeling that one has to fit into the other. You know what I mean? That just didn't enter my space of mind at all, that I could like express it somehow and just live with my body or even just experiment with it because I had to turn out a certain way that I was recognized as a woman by others.
Mhm.
I didn't have that sense of, oh, this isn't going to all pull together for me. And as well as, again, having attraction to women, it just didn't add up for me. Unless it added up and it logically made sense to me, um, again, I shut it down within myself.
So are you saying that what didn't make sense was having feelings of being a woman and then being attracted to a woman that was
That was
same?
one thing. And also expressing myself as a woman and kind of just saying, this is the person I am. However I express my gender is just part of me. And whatever bodily changes or things I want to do is just part of it. It was always an adversarial relationship with dysphoria.
Mm.
And that's where my life became stuck because I wouldn't let myself find out what gender dysphoria was and also what my life was as a person and my experimentation, the things I learn about it and what works for me. I didn't have that courage at that time.
Were you in a relationship with the woman that you're still married to?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And
And had you shared that with her?
yeah, she knew it. But at the same time, it was like I also wanted to be this guy that she thought I was.
Mm.
Before you got married, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks before, how much did your gender dysphoria issues interact with what you were about to do?
I want to say by that time, because I had learned a lot about myself in terms of relationship. Like, for instance, my relationship with my wife doesn't have to be my relationship that my parents had, and I don't have to be the same person, and we don't have to be all knowing when we marry. It's more like it's a journey together. And I want to say at that time, I had come to a point where I just felt so I was at a dead end with it, and I was so afraid of taking any further steps that I kind of just shut down, and I was able to shut that down in myself. I knew I wanted to marry the person I was marrying, and I knew why, and I knew that we really learned together. We really were learning to love each other and ourselves, and our life was blossoming that way. And I have a tendency maybe to, believe the people around me and says, "Oh, this is kind of a disorder, yeah, but you're a man, you have to deal with it." And so that kind of thing. And so I kind of like, okay, and I did a good job at it. Like,
Mhm.
Of
again, part of
course.
it's wanting to do the good job, and I want to excel at everything. So I really excelled at suppressing myself. But again, it wasn't because I wanted to get married. I wanted to get married, and I wanted to get married to the person I was getting married to.
Mhm. I was always told that it would fix me.
Oh, okay.
And I knew that was all wrong, but it's part of the checkbox. So I got married anyway.
Oh, yeah, sure. Just like
So
having
did,
children, right? Having children make your relationship better, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
so did you have that sense that getting married would be something that would fix everything, or was it just that you were committed to this person?
No, I think I knew that because I knew that I had gone through this period of kind of awakening to my feelings. And
Hmm.
I gone through, working, especially working, kind of learning to see my parents as human and forgiving them. And, and just kind of like, oh, these people did the best they could in my life. Now it's up to me. And so I was kind of feeling some sense of like maybe more lightness in my life anyway. And maybe part of it was that I met somebody that I really loved and that we really saw things in many ways that would be mutually supportive. And again, I didn't see coming out as something I could even do. And I wanted somebody in my life, not that I felt like I settled, but I knew that my spouse in many ways had accepted that about me, even though I was the one that shut it off. She didn't ask me to, but I started shutting it off because I wanted things to fit into a certain way for myself desperately.
Hmm.
You wanted to conform to the social norms
Yeah, and be accepted.
and be accepted.
Yeah.
And that's a very normal feeling. And that's what we all struggle with is how we feel about who we are inside does not agree with society.
So, what was the catalyst? When did you finally decide that there was something you had to do, that you had to come out, that you had to transition?
Okay, so let me put more bricks in the wall first,
Okay.
because really, I had these beliefs that, and this is a distortion of Buddhism, is that, truthfulness, what's truthfulness? And I wanted to be a monk at one point, so it's like you don't have any attachment to what you're wearing or how you're
Mm.
presenting yourself, what you're called, so it's really about like transcending, my thinking is about transcending any desire.
Oh.
I saw fighting that as like, points for me. So that's again something I could build my ego around. And so that kind of got pretty deep. And so, I mean, it's feeling unworthy, and I hadn't dealt with that. And so, even though I didn't do the monk path, which I felt like I should have done at the time, but I let that go. But at the same time, I felt like it's just some way, shape, or form, like a lay Buddhist or somebody that's on a spiritual path. I saw myself as spiritual. So again, it's kind of wrestling with these desires. And I saw a need to wrestle with them. And that's my thinking. It's not necessarily that's a spiritual thing, but it's like I was interpreting whatever dharma that way, and it doesn't mean it was true. It means that that's how I was interpreting it to protect myself.
Hmm.
So this again is like now probably since I was counseling, so it's again another 25, almost 30 years from my first counseling sessions. But what happened? That's a good question. What happened? How did this all happen?
Was there a catalyst? Was there something that,
Yes.
yes, okay.
Um, yeah, about 9 years ago, I was at a festival and I was helping some friends out. And they said, "Oh, go look around. Enjoy yourself. It's a festival, spring festival." Okay, great. Sounds great. And I remember coming across this table, and there were three people talking. I noted that it was kind of the end of the day, and they were just being really chatty behind the table. And it was, I would say, two women and a trans woman were talking to each other. And no words came up in my mind. It was just my mind suddenly was in kind of like suspended animation. It was completely silent. And I watched the light stream through this trans woman's hair. It was really beautiful. And she had like purple nail polish on that was glittery, and she had makeup on. And what really dawned on me, not at that moment, but it took me, maybe even that evening, is kind of like there was no shred of shame in that person at all.
You could see that.
I could see it. I could see it. There was just
Okay.
an aliveness in that person that, but I totally had a sense of like connection with her, with being trans that I, of course, had buried so long. And at the same time, all the shame that came up for me just did not exist in her world about that.
Hmm.
That's when the whole house of cards of denial just fell to pieces. My mind could no longer compartmentalize that feeling. Um, and I had to face it. There was just no way my brain couldn't do it anymore.
So
And
was there a sense of possibilities? Did that
well, it was more
occur?
like, first of all, experiencing the dysphoria and rawness. There wasn't 10 layers of intellectual cushions between the dysphoria and me.
Mm, hmm.
Suddenly there was, I am that.
Mm. The awareness.
Yes. And so the awareness, which is Buddhist teachings,
Hmm.
may not be convenient. And it wasn't convenient. And I was scared. I was suicidal. I didn't know what to do with it. I thought my whole life was going to fall apart. And that night I cross-dressed, probably first time in quite a while. I did it a few times, maybe in maybe 30 years, but very few times. But I noticed I did it. And it's like, first thing was like, oh, I've been through this before, just kind of put it away. But then it's like, I just saw the experience totally differently. Like this is part of me, and it's not something I can shrug off. And the other thing was that, that 8-year-old, which I didn't feel like I wanted to be alive. I never saw a trans person at that age. I didn't see somebody that at least was representation of that was healthy. And like, what am I doing? Why can't I at least be out and talk about it and just be? Regardless of what I do, it doesn't matter. But it's like, why am I hiding myself? What am I hiding from people? And that's when I knew that I had to deal with it differently. I didn't know how I was going to deal with it, but I had to be differently. First of
Hmm.
all, it's being upfront with people, and part of it was disclosure. Part of it was finding out what it is, what it is, what is it? I've been pushing it off so far. There's all the things you read, and there's what it is, right? For me. So I had to find those things out. And it then again requires attention and care and just willing to experiment and take risks, which is not my MO.
Figure out how to integrate.
And maybe not even a how, but what is integration? I could see that
Oh.
I've splintered this off for so long. What is it? So I started seeing counseling right away. Of course, I disclosed to my wife, but that was difficult and difficult for her. It was difficult for me. And so I couldn't really, she did what she could, but at the same time, she's going through her own thing, and I couldn't just completely lean on her. So I saw a counselor, and actually we started seeing counseling, which was helpful to us. And then also I started to go to a trans support group. And I had been to other mindful dialogues before, and I had a friend in a mindful dialogue says, I think there's a Buddhist Sangha that's LGBT focused. He says, I don't know why, but I said, but I think I figured it out now. I think I understand it. So I started doing that. So I started doing three things that were supportive of me, that gave me a foundation or a support, a place I could walk to into, that I didn't have to explain myself. And I felt like I could just be, because when that weight was taken off, then I could just start looking at my feelings and other things underneath it. Then also I could see that other people had similar feelings or people that had been through it, and learn how to work with them and their lives had flourished one way or another. So that was really a huge stepping stone for me.
Did you start connecting with people who had been through transitioning?
Oh yes, yes, that's for sure.
Okay.
So I was afraid of them. It's kind of like, you know, you could see that they're excited and they're kind of going through their changes, and I could see all the resistance and all the walls I put in front of myself not to transition, because it was like, first it was like, okay, I'm not going to touch my body. It is what it is. So I started dressing out in public pretty quickly. And so I started, different clothes, different styles. I really enjoyed that. That was fun. And I want to say I did that for almost 2.5 years. Just kind of just trying, feeling what it feels like to be out and to be dressed in femme, and just what I enjoy, and trying different things and just learning with the people I was with, as well as society, see how society interacts with me. And it was interesting because it wasn't what I built it up in my mind to be. Most people are busy looking at their phones or doing other things. They don't care. Most people don't want to bother me. And I've had some glares and stuff and stares, plenty of those, but I can't say that anybody with ill will has confronted me, in public.
Hmm.
Family was different. There was a couple of family members that just saw me as who they thought I should be, and of course, used the Bible
Oh.
as a basis for that, and were not going to accept me otherwise.
Hmm.
You know, I'm sure they're praying for me, which is, and prayers are, beautiful in some ways, but it's more like they're not living the experience I'm living, and that understanding the gender dysphoria, and that's a fact for me. That
Hmm.
means for me, and I had to discover what it is, and so to me that was a path of truth and not a path of like any form of deception. Yeah, I have a male body. Yeah, I have these longings to be a woman. Yeah, I might have attraction to women, but that's just part of the discovery process. There's no limit. Just let it be what it is. A lot of people say,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're deciding to be trans today." No, no, not at all. Oh my God, this is something that I felt all my life. And so it had nothing to do with trying to disrespect people, trying to disrespect any religion, but it's more like being the truth, finding the truth of me as a person. And of course, there's experimentation. Some things stick, some things don't. But it's at the same time, it's just part of the discovery process, which is part of being human. So that was the beginning. And I mean, the idea of transition is sometimes it's like an emergence as a person and an integration as a person. And so these things start to happen as experimenting, find out what gives me joy. Oh, wow, what gives me joy, even though it may not be comfortable to other people. And I wanted to allay the dysphoria. It sucked. It sucked. And so it's like, and I started first by cross-dressing, not cross-dressing, I mean, just expressing myself in clothes that I liked, that were my clothes. And I got support in that. My wife at some point became supportive of like me dressing first in the house. The idea of first being out was a little difficult, but it was like, but I started doing that. And I noticed that the more I just kind of started to build a little bit of like a little confidence in myself, a little support, and but also like I don't know, people are people. Some people are curious, some people are really super affirming, some people didn't care, some people, I mean, so it really the unknown.
Did you go out with your wife or did you go out alone?
We would go out, but there's things, we both had fears of me going out. And of course, he doesn't want me to be assaulted, doesn't want me to be hurt, or us together hurt. But being out, she's always been with me.
Hmm.
She'll hold my hand. She'll, as she got more confidence too, I think as us as a couple, like being out that way, I think has strengthened our relationship too. I mean, there was periods where she said, well, I don't want you to do this. This is definitely, this is the line I draw. But we had to work through just fears. We had to work through fears. And as I've taken steps, we take them together because she's part of my life and she's had a lot of courage too.
It affects her too.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. That's wonderful that you've stayed together and that you've been able to work through it. I'm sure it wasn't 100% rainbows and unicorns, but
Oh no, no, no,
you
it's
were
not.
able to work
Rainbows
through those
and
things.
unicorns.
And that's the growth process, isn't it? That's personal growth, human evolution.
And that's the hard thing to say is that in those periods of difficulty where things feel like they're falling apart, when they really feel like they're falling apart, that is part of the learning process. It's just part of the mind opening up to itself and kind of trying to shrink back because it's like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen here. But I knew that I reached a dead end. Like, this is part of me. I can't go any other way in terms of like trying to fit into a box that is not me.
Mm.
And so I just couldn't do it. I mean, there's some things I couldn't do, right, for her. And so it was hard for me because I like pleasing people.
Mm.
And then it's like, it took me a long time because I saw people taking hormones and stuff and seeming like they're calmer. And that took a couple years. First thing was like shaving.
Oh,
I mean, I had a lot of hair, like, oh, this sucks, so it's got to go. So I started shaving my legs and my body, shaving my whole body. And it's like, oh, I really liked it. And it's, oh boy. And so I did that
that's a
for a
lot of
while.
work.
But it was joy work, right? It was
Was
like, it
it?
just felt
Yeah.
good to do. And it was a relief. There's some euphoria with that as well as some relief of the dysphoria. And it was like, okay, I like this. The hard part was like medical intervention. I had a really big resistance in my mind with that. I was scared, taking good care of my body most of my life.
Mm.
And it's like, well, I want to be careful with that. And so it took me like 8 months. Thought a couple things. I want to change my name. I didn't know to what. And also, I thought about trying hormones, but I was afraid.
Mm.
So it took me 8 months to really kind of journal and talk to other people and counseling and my spouse. And yeah, that was a long road. And then I defined said, okay, okay, let's do this. It's time just try it. If I don't like it, I think I'll know pretty quickly if it's just not working for me. And of course, get my first of all spiral and lactone, and I took that, and I felt like, oh, okay, this feels kind of good. It's kind of brings it off the edge a little bit. And we waited a week before you take the first estrogen patch. So I started on patches, which was low dose at the time. The first time I put the patch on, it was like, okay, what's going to happen here? I don't. I was kind of skeptical of the. And then when it started to like, I could feel the effects, and it was like a softening, a sense of softening of my emotions, but softening of the dysphoria. And it's kind of like that feeling, I don't know if people ever grew up where they had chalkboards and you're asked to, drag your fingernails across
Oh,
the
yes.
chalkboard, your whole body just tenses up you know, and it felt like a whole lifetime of that went away. And it was like, not that dysphoria was completely gone, but it was kind of an edge was taken off it, like there's nothing I could ever do that would do that. And I was excited about the changes. So as changes started to happen, I got excited about that. So two things is it took the edge off the dysphoria, and number two was that, oh, my fat is redistributing and I'm growing breasts, and my nipple sizes were changing and my skin was softening, and it was like, oh, this is awesome.
This is what you've been looking for.
Yes, yes, it was. And so I started low dose, and I think it took me like 6 months to decide to go full dose. So I was doing that. And during that time, I mean, I had thought about other surgeries, and that was hard too. It was like, really being honest with myself where my dysphoria centers were, and like, okay, what do you want to do? And of course, medical change. Then I started getting facial surgery. Do I want breast augmentation? Do I want bottom surgery? I mean, all these questions. So I let those doors be open for the first time in my life. It was scary because again, it's change, and it's change for people around me, change for my marriage, change for a lot of things. And I was afraid to really let myself do that. But then suddenly when I did, it was like, it felt like, oh, this is exciting.
Hmm.
Let's see what this is. Let's get consultations. Let's learn up, and that's what I did for hormones too. I did the same thing. I did a lot of research. I would go to like different places and read scientific journals about it and hormone replacement in general, as well as transgender hormone replacement and what kind of success and what effects and what side effects and same things with all the surgeries. And so I had one, two, three consultations at least, and opted out of two and chose one.
Okay.
And
That's the scientist in you doing
yeah,
all your
and kind of
research.
and part of it was one, I says, well, I'm not sure how this is going to turn out. And the other one was like, of the other two, which one do I want the most? And I picked the one that I wanted. And that was a long process. It was a very long process. I chose a surgeon, and the preparations for that were lengthy, painful, but I was very resolved.
Hmm.
And I would say that took 2 years of prep. And then the surgery, by at this point, that 2 year period, I want to say, socializing it with my wife was a process for us. And but at some point, she was fully supportive. She started to see that this is just part of me as a person, and it's not reflecting on her, but it didn't make me a bad person anyway. You know what I mean? And so she was very supportive and it was very sweet, but that meant the world to me in terms of like having people around me that maybe didn't understand, but they were just like, your life is for you to explore. And they were supporting of that, and not whether they believed in it or not, didn't have to understand it or not, but they loved me.
Hmm.
And so then after the surgery, it was a long process. Oh my gosh, it's been a process. Maybe even 4 years total. And so, oh my God, that was wonderful.
Did you get did you get support at work? Or were you
Oh, that's a
working?
good question.
I
We
mean,
haven't gone down that
you've
that
got a
that
long
side.
time frame there. So,
Hey, that's a good question. I didn't even um yeah, we didn't talk much. Maybe I'll rewind a minute here about the disclosing beyond just my wife and my close knit
oh,
circles. Um, Most of my family was quite supportive. My mother was like, I love you and you always have a place to stay.
mm,
That kind of thing. My dad was kind of like, I can't help you with that. Which is an honest statement, So,
yeah.
I mean, what do they do with that? They don't know. But it took me a while to come out of work. I was very afraid of coming out of work. That was one of my biggest fears, of losing my job. So I waited about 2 years before I did that.
Mm,
And of course, thinking about it, grinding on it, like, oh, how's this going to go? And wrote the letter over and over again. And then finally, okay, it's time. And it was really well received.
oh, nice. And were you presenting more femme?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And when you're not there, I didn't until
Oh,
I was probably underdressing and stuff. And maybe some of my mannerisms was more femme. And maybe, but people just, we worked together and, I didn't feel like there was any judgment there. But when I came out, it was, then I definitely started presenting there. And, it's like, I don't know. I felt very supported. I know a lot of people, not everybody, of course, but I haven't been targeted in any way in my workplace for being trans at all.
oh, that's wonderful to hear.
Yeah. Now, some people may not use my pronouns. Many people do. So I kind of learned, you know, I give some grace. I give grace to
Mm,
people. We're working together, and I understand that for whatever reason they think they have to be that, but I'm still myself around them,
mm,
regardless of how they address me. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes I feel sad or dysphoria because of it, but I can't expect the whole world to like rearrange the way I want it.
mhm,
I don't want to completely close myself off from opportunities just because they're not fully supporting. And same thing with travel and all that stuff, right?
oh, yes. That's an issue now, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, so work was a huge surprise for me.
Do you feel you can be authentic at work then?
Oh yeah, no, it's like I get
No
like,
problem.
I get compliments on my outfits, and
Okay.
I, have my group of girlfriends, and I have friends, but many of them are girlfriends. I don't know, just kind of like I built human relationships in that workplace.
Yeah.
This is one thing that I noticed about disclosing, whether it looked like I fit the mold of be recognized as a woman by other people or not. Is that I noticed as I disclosed and I started to express my gender the way I wanted to and gave me joy. And um, I noticed a lot of people, there were certain people around me that suddenly became a lot more trusting of me emotionally.
Oh, interesting.
They just kind of saw me as like what I did is just real. And I mean, you could tell that I'm just trying to be real. And some people I noticed I became a lot closer to in my workplace than, or even outside of my workplace, when it's enriched my relationships with some people. That's for sure.
Isn't it interesting that when you're being more real, that your relationships are changing?
Yeah. And I wasn't trying to force that.
Yeah,
I couldn't.
but you were hiding who you were before. You weren't living as the person you really were inside before. So maybe people were picking up on that and then they saw the difference.
And I've gotten this quite a few times. Like, we knew you were always different.
Oh, oh, really? Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever really dug into that. But it's
Doesn't
like
matter.
I've gotten a few of those, and it's like some things kind of came together in some people's minds. But again, some people just had more depth of sharing with some people.
Mm.
And again, some people kind of kind of closed off. But I remember doing this test before I decided to disclose at work. It's like I just noticed those people who look at me when I go down to the hall and who don't. That's before I came out, right? Like, is this going to be really different? I don't know. And I noticed there wasn't much change, you
Oh,
know,
interesting. Yeah.
because what I was, it's like, I might get in a situation and just suddenly think that somebody's not looking at me simply because I'm dressed this way, but maybe they were always like that. I just didn't notice that. So I kind of looked at that before and I noticed that, yeah, there's some people that they don't want to interact with people in the hallway or at the water fountain or something like that.
Mm.
It's just what that person is, and it's not right or wrong, but it's like I would have a tendency to blame it on me. You know?
Yes. So
All these
other,
things I'm learning, these things that I'm learning about myself, how I view other people, how I'm projecting how other people think. This is all like enriching learning that I'm having from just not hiding from myself.
well, and it seems like you're learning more things about the human experience. Does that
Hmm.
kind of fit for you?
Yeah, because it's a holistic experience and it doesn't necessarily have to fit into any box.
Yeah,
It
right.
can, there's characterizations like, oh, that seems to be like how things stack up, or
Mhm.
it could not be, right? And it's like, and realizing just because they don't stack up the way we think about them doesn't mean that they're not part of life.
Yeah. Well, and you were attributing certain characteristics of other people to the fact that you had a secret and that they were looking at you as if, you know, maybe they figured this out or not. And you were talking about the shame and things like that, but maybe it was just who they are. That's just the way they are.
Yeah. And also, and I think people around me can attest to this. I think I was learning this along the way, even before I came out, but I always felt like I had to be the smartest person in the room. I always felt like I had to have the answer. I always felt like, I had to know it. And I'm sure that grated on some people, so I sometimes didn't leave room for other people's wisdom. I
Hmm.
didn't leave room for other people just to come from where they are coming from because I felt like I had to be the smartest person in the room. And to see myself as a pushy person, probably in subtle ways I have been,
So
and
how has that
kind of
changed
arrogant in some
now?
ways. I mean, I know that I don't know it all, and I never will know it all. And also, I think it's also helped me, not that I didn't see this before, but it becomes very apparent that I can't look at anybody and know what their life is, what they're experiencing, and I certainly can't assign a value to them,
Hmm.
anybody,
Hmm.
right? And that can be hard because there's a part of my mind that wants to protect myself. And it's like, it's easy to try to take a shortcut and use some kind of bias to close myself off and avoid somebody. But I've learned to know, I don't know for each person, right? And so it's working with fear again and just taking risks and being vulnerable. And in doing that, maybe that's part of it, but I'm more aware of arrogance in myself. And also I just kind of like, okay, yeah, I don't know, or learning to give people some space.
Where does this shame and guilt function in your life these days?
Oh, these days, oh, good question. It crops up now and then, but it's more like there's an awareness of it's a fragment. It's a fragment based on some perspective that's a perspective. Things are learned and things are in memory, right? And seeing that that's a feeling that is you know, it's a fragment of thinking, a perspective. Because I get triggered, I get triggered, and those feelings like fear, especially, or that feeling of resistance crops up. But it's more working with the feeling, giving that space. There's nothing wrong with the feeling. There's nothing right about the feeling, and I don't have to put a value judgment in anymore. And so it kind of fades on its own.
Hmm.
I'm sure, of course, there's times where I'll go into situations, especially if I'm around people that seem to want to define me, and of course, there's like resistance to that, and like, oh, I want, of course, that person to like me or to accept me as I am, but there's a temptation to try to dialogue or to try to debate somebody.
Mm,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Debate my way through it and go through all the history of like, oh, there's trans people been forever, and this is just my experience. And like, you know, I just feel afraid and I don't want to be judged and rejected, but that's as far as it goes. And let that feeling be there. And that person may just carry a viewpoint that they're not willing to let go of for whatever reason. And the more I spend trying to bend that, it's like trying to bend steel, right? And just I don't know. But the feelings are difficult. I mean, it's just still uncomfortable, but it's like they don't control me anymore.
So you don't feel compelled to convince everybody that, whatever you were trying to convince them of.
I think I'd let it go faster.
Yeah.
Not that I don't. And but some people really want to learn, so it's learning to see the
Yeah.
difference. Some
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
really curious and they really have questions. And I've had some people that I really actually adore. They're like, blah, 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 asking this question and that question. It's like, thank you. Because it's instead of it being kind of like this silence or something like that, but they really want to know, but they're trying to be polite and instead of just asking questions. And I think the deepest one thing that has happened, this has happened, is that some people really listen very deeply, and my spouse is one of them. It was hard for her, but she listened to me for quite a while and started to see that there's something that I needed to work with. But I've dialogued with other people or just people that were really listening. And I've had people come out of dialogues about my gender and what gender dysphoria means to me, and the fact that my mind did not necessarily have a sense of proprioception in my body or a sense of even recognition of my body as being part of itself. And yes, I have a male body, but my mind just would not have a sense that it belongs to me, even though there's an understanding that this is just the way the body is. But when I started to describe like the dysphoria, the sense where the mind isn't connecting to something as an inherent part of itself, when people were really listening to that, I noticed some people started to see that, oh, I see that my mind actually does that. There's all kinds of things that I do to reinforce my gender, how I dress, how people address me. The whole social structure is there to reaffirm people's genders,
Hmm.
and it's happening all the time. But the thing is, it's socially acceptable and it's so easy to not be aware of that,
Hmm.
people take it for granted that this is something absolute, but it's really just the mind reinforcing something about itself to regenerate that sense of self, constantly regenerate that sense of embodiment, that sense of being alive in the body. And see, I didn't have that luxury because my mind couldn't do it. It just those reinforcements would make me feel more and more disintegrated.
Hmm.
And so I saw that was the mind doing that, but most people didn't see their minds doing that. But I've had discussions with people where they start seeing that, oh, I can see that my mind is doing this too, but it's reaffirming. It's always reaffirming. I can't imagine that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
My body and all the people around me are just reaffirming an identity and a sense of connection in the body that, that the mind is creating. The mind
Yeah.
creates that sense of connection. I'm not a lump of clay.
Yes.
The mind connected to that lump of clay, and that mind has a lot of influence of how we define ourselves.
Well, and cisgender people have had a different experience. They haven't had the dysphoria of it, but their minds are doing the same thing for them, affirming
No,
their gender, affirming who they are.
but I do want to acknowledge that women have been raised in a double standard, and it's been difficult for women because their bodies are meant to be sexualized, but at the same time shamed for being sexualized. Um, Dress sexy, but don't. Be sexy, but don't. Be sexy, but only a certain period of time. And don't be smart, be sexy. All those things that they're disintegrating. And it's like, so it's just affirming that part of a woman and not the whole woman, right?
You're
Men are
seeing
different.
that
Men are
point.
the same way, though. I mean, men are, you got to be strong, you got to be in charge, you got to take the bull by the horns, you can't feel a thing, and you got to know it all, and you better just like show your worth.
Well, the experience of being who you are, has that changed how you view those things?
Yeah, because it's something I put on myself.
Yeah. You're very introspective, all the work that you've done personally and your introspection. You're realizing those things, that's what goes on without even being aware of them.
And I can't, I can't take credit for the learning. It's more like just opening the eyes, opening the attention, in the attention, because in attention there's vulnerability, there's sensitivity, and there's no choice in that. And there's really whatever learning comes from there, it just appears. It's become self-evident, and it's not something that a lesson that I could have created. It's because I had no clue that I was going to learn that lesson. But it's more just being willing to pay attention and open the eyes. And I can't say that I've always been that way, and I'm not still not always like that way. But I think I do it faster because it's like, dead ends are actually opportunities.
Yeah. So how's life as a woman different from your expectations?
That's a good question because it's first of all, my pronouns I use she and they, and part of it is that there's a lot of things in life that really I don't feel are gendered at all because I feel like I'm having a me experience and not necessarily a woman experience or a man experience. And so oftentimes there's a feeling of just experiencing and just enjoying an experience, and it doesn't feel like a gender. And there's times where like, oh, I really feel girly today, and loving it. And it's like, and is there times that I feel really masculine? Maybe sometimes like I'll work. I mean, sometimes I'll get kind of like maybe a little cocky or like I still lift weights, It's one of those things I didn't do for a while because it's like, oh, this is not femme, but I like lifting weights. It's good for my body. I like
And women lift
exercising.
weights too.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And so, yeah, that was just one of those things that I built up in my mind and that I had to let go of. I still enjoy things that would be considered masculine. I do a lot of things in my life that I have an interest in how things work, and I have interest in science, and I have interest in all these things that I was taught when I was young that that's not what girls do.
Mm.
So part of it is kind of reclaiming parts of myself as a woman that were considered not as a woman. And in terms of like, in some ways, I'm learning to honor my upraising as a man because it was like it informed me a lot about how guys are raised and how painful that is sometimes. I mean, it really is like taught to kind of shut off. You're kind of taught to be in control. And so many things in life you just can't control. And
Mm.
it's kind of dehumanizing. And so I'm learning to appreciate that and I mean, I'm still learning to connect with men. Some don't feel really comfortable. I mean, I don't think they know what to make of it. And maybe that's my projection. Maybe that's something I'm still learning to open my eyes to is how I react to my relationships with men. Not that I don't have any, I do have close men friends, but in terms of just allowing myself to relate to men and not feeling, oh, well, things come up. Okay, yeah. So it's like not wanting to be objectified, not wanting to be like, and I noticed this from some men is that there's a sense that just because I've come out as trans is that this is sexualization,
Mm.
and that's and not that I don't have any sexual feelings, but that's not certainly not what it's all about for me being trans. I mean, it can be part of it, but it's certainly not the whole thing. And I certainly don't want to be seen as an object of curiosity. I can't blame men for that. It's just, I may be projecting into the experience again.
Yeah. What is it that surprises you about your life?
Um, probably the sense of freedom that I could never imagine of disclosing, but it's not just disclosing about being trans. And we talked about integration earlier. Truth is far and wide with all kinds of things, right? And so this is one of them, but this has been a hard one for me. But not having a secret, not having to hide from myself, not having to try to disintegrate my experience has been hugely unburdening for me. Oh my God. And so I
Mm.
could never imagine that. And I think what I'm going through now, as we have gone into an administration that is trying to enforce a gender ideology, that there's the absoluteness of quote man and woman, and that has to stack up into your body and your gender identity and your sexual orientation, and that anything other than that is false and deceptive. At first, that really frightened me, but now it's kind of like, okay, well, that they can think that way, but I just need to live. And as I take steps in life, it's like, I don't know. I feel like whatever's going to happen around me is going to happen around me. I can't really decide that, but I can't judge people either. And that's the thing. So it's just learning to live my life and just pay attention and to abide in love, whatever may emerge from that. I mean, I can speak up, nothing wrong with speaking up, but at the same time, I can't point a finger.
Mm-hmm.
I can't point a finger at somebody else's experience. And I know a lot of people are struggling now. It's not just trans people. It's a lot of people are struggling. And so it's like, how do we start that conversation as we as human beings can start to work together to support each other as a communities and as a nation? And those questions are huge. And, how can we feed ourselves as a nation? How can we just start respecting each other? I mean, all these important questions. And I feel like it's helped me equip me in terms of taking my own place in that.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's not like I
Well,
have to change the world, but be the change you wish to see in the world. I think that was a Gandhi thing.
and then it starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with Wendy. We do what we
Yeah.
can, start where we are and share. And the fact that you're sharing your experience today is just remarkable, very affirming, very hopeful to see how you've come through your life with things that you struggled with. And then you've come out of that, and to hear you talk about the joy now and more peace. I'm hearing, there's more peace. Okay, the shame and the guilt, maybe it rears its head once in a while, but you're a different person now emotionally. The physical part may have helped, but emotionally, you're a different person than you were 30, 40 years ago.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And
Also, we all can share that, and it's not,
yeah,
again, it's like, and I think what's the latest, just working with people that are afraid of me who don't know me.
yeah.
They've been taught to be afraid of me just because I'm trans or whatever, but they don't know me, and it's like,
Mm.
and I can't say I've never had that habit, and so it's like, okay. But whatever that triggers for me is again working with that trigger because it's like I can't control that. I just can't control that.
Well, and we teach people to fear. They,
Hmm.
children don't grow up automatically fearing all these things. They, would be trusting, but they're taught to fear. We're taught to fear. Even as adults, you got to fear people who are transgender. You've got to fear immigrants. You've got to fear people of color, whatever.
Hmm.
People are trying to impose that for nefarious reasons.
Yep.
That's not the true human experience, I don't think, or
Or
shouldn't.
even supporters of this group or that group or Republicans or Democrats, it's like people, right? I notice when I meet people in a human connection, it's very different. Some of that stuff seems to melt away.
Yeah, yeah. Sienna, this has been a wonderful conversation. Any
Sure.
last words that you have to share?
Oh, I don't know. It's just, yeah, the journey goes on. I keep looking, and I don't think there is such thing as being done in terms of like learning and how love is or truth may move me and now or even the future. So it's learning to grasp change and learning to accept the uncertainty and the unknown and learning not to project it as the enemy.
Mm, that we even have enemies.
Yeah.
That we create enemies out of people that there's no reason to create enemies.
Yeah. I
Um,
guess that's it. So thank you for the opportunity. It's been lovely. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
yeah,
for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome, Wendy. Thanks for your presence.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening too.
I can tell you, after 11 years, it never stops. You constantly evolve, you constantly changed, and it just goes on. I'm becoming a very different person than I was 11 years ago.
Beautiful.
And all my friends are cisgender people. That's it. I'm part of society. And that's all I ever wanted was to be me and to be part of society.
Thanks, Wendy. As we come to the end of this conversation with Siena, it's really hard not to sit here with the depth of what she shared. And the important thing is that we do sit with what we've heard from her. Her story reminds us that this journey, whether you're born transgender or your experience is not transgender, it isn't about fitting into a box, as she talked about, or reaching some final destination of who you are. It's not an event. It's the whole process of growth and being human. And it's about the courage to face yourself honestly and to question what you've been taught and to slowly and sometimes painfully, which is what Siena talked about, bring all these pieces of yourself together into the light. Take a look, see what's going on. And Siena spoke about stop leaving parts of herself behind and instead integrating it. We use that word to integrate, to become whole. And maybe that's something that all of us can reflect on. What are you still hiding? What am I still hiding? Where are you still holding back parts of who you are? And what will it take for you to live your authentic self? And what will you find at that point along that journey? Siena talks about relationships being different now that she's open and having great conversations with people, finding out different things about people without the judgment. Because in the end, it's not just Siena's story, it's really parts of everyone's story. And it's an invitation. It's an invitation to listen more deeply, to lead with compassion, and to recognize that every person you meet is navigating their own complex, usually unseen journey toward being a full human, having that fully human experience. And then to give others and yourself grace, as she said, compassion, acceptance for yourself as you're going through things and the people that you meet. So, Siena, thank you for your honesty, for your vulnerability, and your willingness to share this space with us today. Your voice will stay with our listeners long after this episode ends, because I know it's going to stay with me too. And then to our audience, thank you for being here with us. If our conversation moved you, challenged you, opened a door to your thinking, we encourage you to subscribe and share this episode. Leave a review and start a conversation with somebody else. Keep showing up. You matter. Your voice matters. And remember, until next time, stay curious and stay kind. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Demystifying the Transgender Journey. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode of our fascinating interviews. You can also find more information on our website, thetransgenderjourney.com. So until next time, stay curious and stay kind.